the motivation of organics in the first place, which really was around the consumer. It was our consumers who created the industry more than the farmers did. We were responding to what they wanted. A lot of the history is about all these organic farmers are so smart and they came together and they did this thing. But it was always, at least here, it was always about our consumers. I mean, when I started out, we had all these little natural food stores around here, our store, and we were just supplying them, and we were trying to do what they wanted us to do. And we ended up getting the laws because people wanted those laws. We didn't feel we needed them so much as they feel we needed them.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Linley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops grown in healthy soils and organic livestock raised on well-managed pasture, all without synthetic fertilizers and toxic chemicals. You just heard from Warren Weber, whose legendary Star Root Farms was the oldest continuously certified organic farm in California before it was sold to the University of San Francisco in 2017. Warren and Dave had a conversation way back in 2022, some of it philosophical, some of it sentimental, and some of it challenging. We hope you'll enjoy it. There are a few updates to the answers Dave gives Warren here about the Real Organic Project in the 2 years since this interview happened. About its structure, our current executive board is made up of 11 members now, 8 of whom are farmers, and our current advisory board is still composed of a group of 50 thought leaders in the organic movement, including journalists, chefs, scientists, and professors. Our standards, which are crafted by some of the best farmers we know, are always evolving, and today we have a 13% rejection rate from our certification program, which reflects our commitment to rigor and integrity.
I'm very pleased today to be talking with one of the true pioneers of the organic movement in America, Warren Weber. And Warren, you were, amongst the very first practitioners in America. I imagine, Paul Keen and Walnut Acres must have been a little before you.
Well, yes, there was a lot of people practicing what we now call organic agriculture, kind of basically nature-based farming at the time. I mean, I started in, we got certified in 74. We were looking at it from, you might call it a business point of view. We were looking at how we can succeed doing what we think we ought to do and bringing everyone else along. IFOAM, International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movement, came here for their meeting in, it was the late 70s, to San Francisco. And they made the round of farms, and they ended up a star out at the last. So I said, what are your impressions of California? And these are farmers from Australia and Europe and Africa and around. And they said, to a person, they said, this is very different than what we're used to. Very different what you all are doing here. They said, what you're doing here is it seems so entrepreneurial, so businesslike. And it was. We were all long hairs in the beginning, but what happened, we kind of shoved off the ones that didn't want to make a success of this thing, who didn't want to supply people with organic produce, who were in it for their own kind of lifestyle reasons and not so much for the overall culture. The organic industry here was driven by consumers. We did the standards. We created the first standards in 1979 with the state. Because the consumers said, we need to know what we're getting when we're going into all these wonderful natural food stores we have around here. We need to know what that is, and we need real assurance. So we thought, okay, then we need something bigger than our own organization. We have to reach out. So we ended up doing to the state of California initially with the health department, first standards.
Okay. So Warren, that's very interesting what you said, that you were entrepreneurial, you were making it a business. And like all farmers who make a living, I'm entrepreneurial too. And it's a business for me too. And we all know that if this is going to thrive and survive, it needs to somehow sustain the people involved in it, the farmers, the distributors, the retailers. But we've been struggling with so much compromise in the National Organic Program, and I would say it's gone beyond compromise to dissolution.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
I had a conversation with a guy who was a nice man. He was a director of CCOF, one on the board.
Oh, yeah.
And another mutual friend set it up, and we had a conversation. This was about the certification of hydroponics. It was sort of like he'd never thought about it. And we had a nice conversation, and at the end he said, I kind of envy you, because it sounds like in the Northeast, organic is still a movement. And out here, it's really just become a business.
Oh, I see, yeah. That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought,
well,
I want it to be a business, but it's got to be standing on the shoulders of a movement, is how I feel about it, or else any compromise is acceptable, because it's just a business.
No, well, that's very true, of course, and the loss of the notion of the soil-based aspect, which is so fundamental to what we believed in and what is organic really needs to mean, always mean. That has been really unfortunate, and I think people take it over. Well, the younger farmers back then, in the 70s and 80s, organic farmers who created it, we did it so successfully that it was taken away from us in the 90s. I had to shut down. We shut down for a while because the big guys got in.
And what was how did that show up in your farm? Why did you have to shut down?
What happened was that we were doing a lot of mescaline mixes. They call it spring mix now mostly, but mescaline mixes, which is now huge. But we were doing that, and I had moved down to open up winter production down in Coachella Valley in 1987. And so we were growing down there, and we were shipping from there in the wintertime back east in different places. Semis would come in and they'd pick up, we were a small farm. I think we were doing maybe 60 acres there for a while, and we did 100. But they would pick up, partial loads, and they'd go to Boston or wherever. We did a lot of this was mescaline mix and various salad greens, and we did 60 different types of greens. And all of a sudden, I'm told, and we were selling mescaline mixes at, I think, $11 a box, 3-pound box. And our break-even was 9, so we were doing pretty well. And it just, all of a sudden I was told, you're going to have to lower your price. And I said, how much? It was $5. We can pay you $5. And if you can't fill the semi, we can't come in. And I couldn't do either of those things. So we just stopped. And within about 10 days, I got a call. It was really dramatic and really difficult. I mean, I actually hung on for a while, as long as I could, and kind of lost a few $100,000, and then I just had to quit altogether. And when I did, I got a call from Grimway Farms, which was just a conventional carrot grower doing 40% of all the carrots in the nation, asking if I wanted to rent them some ground, lease ground to them. And so I said, okay. And they had decided, months previous, that they saw this industry growing. It was growing, in the 80s, it was growing like 20% a year. It was doubling every 4 years or something. It was small, but it was fast. So it was.
And it wasn't growing because your marketing was so good. It was growing because people wanted it.
Because people wanted it, and the stores were evolving, and natural food business was changing and growing very fast.
So Warren, okay, you brought up two really interesting points. One is that there is a place for big industrial ag, and that they might even do it right. They might.
You mean industrial organic ag?
Industrial organic ag. That they might grow food that's nutritionally equivalent to what the small farmer will do.
Well, that's a separate question altogether. Nutrition, analyzing the plant. I remember being told, and I believe it's actually correct, that if you take a broccoli and you harvest broccoli and you get it to the freezer, cold storage in the freezer within 2 hours, it has more nutritional value than the broccoli that's traveled another three days in the market. That's scary, but that's nutrition. So that's a separate subject. Then the practices that we demanded for organic certification, the bigger farms can do it, and it was very interesting to watch Grimway when they leased our 60 acres in the beginning. Then they only needed that for a few years, but it was very interesting to watch because they were doing everything that we did before.
They were growing cover crops.
They were composting. They were companion planting. They could do larger blocks than we were doing, but that's you could end up growing 20 acres of carrots or beets or whatever organically, and it wasn't really a problem. You could do it successfully.
They were taking care of their workers the same way you did?
Well, I don't know about that. But that was not one of the standards.
Right.
And there was no real good definition for that. Although I can tell you plenty of small organic farmers were not paying workers' comp.
Sure.
We had this organic scene going on, everyone's doing the right thing. So anyway, having watched Grimway, I was impressed by their practices. But it was also scary to see that they could just sort of take it over.
Okay, so it was scary. Was it just scary personally because you saw your business dissolving, or was it scary as a citizen because you went, this isn't really the world I dream of?
Well, it was very scary personally. I mean, I went through a real depression, and we had to stop doing what we were doing. And I I started another direction of having a cold storage over in San Rafael, and I was putting together boxes of other people's stuff, and because we had this year-round production, which was really excellent in being able to produce all the year, and pretty much the same mix of crops was turned out to be very, very helpful to our cash flow and getting ready to buy seeds for the next plantings and all that. But it was a personal blow to me. It took me a while to accept the fact that we're living in a capitalist system, and these are the things that happen.
Yeah, but there's a lot of kinds of capitalism.
And it's I honestly have never been sure if it was a bad aspect or a good aspect. I think there's so many different ways of looking at these things. It certainly provided a lot more organic produce to a lot more people than we were doing, than all of our 1,000 little farms were doing. When the big guys got in, they broadened the market, and Whole Foods grew, and all these stores grew, and it just became a lot bigger. So a lot of people in places around the country who didn't know what organic was started to find it on their shelves in Costco, for God's sakes.
Yes, Walmart's the biggest vendor of organic produce in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to say another thing that occurred to me at the time was that I realized, these guys cannot afford not to do it, these practices religious, in a strict sense. I don't want to use the word religious, but in a strict sense, because they have more to lose. They have a huge thing to lose with a scandal. They're in all these stores now. They built up this business. It's still a small part of their overall business, but if they want to stay in it, they can't afford some scandal. Somebody calls up and say, "Hey, I know they're using chemical fertilizers out there." They can't. Whereas the smaller growers, and I know this from my personal involvement over the years, the smaller growers, a lot of times were faced with choices, made bad choices, not organic choices.
That's true of the big ones too.
It's true for them.
Look at Aurora.
I'm sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm sure, and that's why I'm a big backer of, or not a big backer, but I'm a fervent backer of organic eye. We need this. We need this oversight. We need this watchdog oversight. It should be even larger and more effective and everything than it is. But yeah,
fraud exists, and it exists on many scales. What we're seeing now, without a doubt, is that these corporations are so big and powerful that they can change the rules. It's not fraud anymore.
Yeah, right.
The billion-dollar organic egg industry is legal.
Yeah.
And if the animal welfare reform had been passed, according to the head of the National Organic Program, 70% of the organic eggs in America would have been decertified.
Nah.
And he was intending to pass it. But he couldn't, because the politicians stopped it because it was too big to fail.
Okay. So I have a question for you.
Okay.
So is real organic, what is the long-term strategy of real organic? Is it just to have a certification on top of the organic standards, or is it to start something else? And if you did that, you would probably do it outside of the government. And would you consider, I mean, I'm just throwing this out, this United Underwriter Lab idea that we came up with back in '79. When we talked about what organic means, how we're gonna protect the notion of it, the label of it, some people said, a couple of people said, we should create a fund for ourselves, defend ourselves in court, create an underwriter lab kind of an organization, and protect our label in court. And other people said, no, we don't want the government to do it. And we went the latter route. So here's Real Organic at that. I think maybe at that stage.
Yes. I believe my hope would be that the Real Organic label and the movement that supports it would become strong enough that it would become the choice for people who are seeking that kind of food. And I think there are millions and millions of people seeking that kind of food. I think they're often being misled. They don't know that what they're getting is hydroponic berries. They don't know that what they're getting is CAFO milk and eggs. And I think if there was an alternative that they could rely on, they would move to it.
So what's my question about that is, so what's the structure of it? What's the structure of this label?
How are decisions made, you mean?
No, what's it, is it a association of members? Is it a nonprofit corporation?
Okay.
How does it fund itself? What are its rules? How does it protect its own rules? Who's involved? Who gets in? Who doesn't get in? What are the criteria? What's the whole list
Okay,
of things? And what
okay.
are all these standards?
I'll tell you all that.
Okay.
All right. So we have about 50 board members. The largest group are the advisory board. We've got 15 members on a standards board, and they are voted in by all the boards. Mm-hmm. And we've got a 5-person executive board. Mm-hmm. And the executive board is doing the heavy lifting. The standards board sets the standards. And it's like the NOSB, the National Organic Standards Board, except instead of being chosen by Tom Vilsack, it's chosen by these 50 people. And you would know and respect virtually all of those 50 people. They are mostly farmers, but not all. Mm-hmm. We've got some scientists, and we've got some journalists, and we've got some educators, but the majority are farmers. The executive board, 4 out of 5 are farmers. And unlike the NOSB, when they decide something, it's not just a recommendation, it is the new standard, unless the executive board deems it illegal or suicidal. Mm-hmm. And so pretty much every recommendation they've ever made has been immediately adopted. So that's how standards are set. Mm-hmm. And as I say, instead of one person selecting them, there's 50. And
so you have the standards.
Yeah.
And then you have a certification process for those standards?
We do. And we have a team of about 10 people who review the written applications. If they pass the written, then they inspect the farm. The inspections are only once every 5 years, but you must be certified by USDA annually. So that kind of heavy lifting of reviewing all the materials is already done. It might not be done perfectly. That's the USDA's challenge, but we're accepting that most of certification is pretty reasonable and is pretty well done. The part that's not well done is that they're knowingly certifying hydroponics, they're knowingly certifying CAFOs, they're knowingly looking the other way on grain fraud. Mm-hmm. And so those are the 3 big areas that we're looking for. Soil-based. We have a grid of soil practices to ensure that they are attending to building and maintaining the fertility of the soil. We have fairly strict animal welfare standards that they must have access. We require higher percentage of pasture than the USDA does. So the chickens have to actually go outside, not just have a little hole in the wall that they would be crazy to go out of.
Yeah. Oh, I think that sounds really good. to get away from the bad practices.
And I'll
in
say
the
one more
USO.
thing. It's free to the farmers.
It's what?
Free to the farmers. So we entirely survive off donations.
I see.
Now, I don't know if that will last forever, but we're trying very hard
Yeah.
to have that be, because
Yeah.
I prefer the Danish model to the US model. In Denmark, the government pays for certification, 100%. I think that's a sane way to do it. I'm not opposed to government involvement. I'm opposed to government corruption.
But in Denmark, then they're paying for the certification, but then they're also doing the certifications. I mean,
The government is,
the government's certifying.
the government
They're not
has,
private.
I
not
think,
private groups.
I think they have private groups who are certifiers, as in the US.
I see. Yeah.
The government
Yeah.
approves them, but the government pays the bill.
Yeah.
The government also offers tremendous amount of technical support and marketing support to the organic
Yeah,
movement, because they see it as a social benefit for the whole country. Even if you choose not to buy organic, they think, yeah, but your water's cleaner, right?
Yeah. Right.
The whole system is healthier.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the only thing I hear in there that I would suggest is that you visit your farms more frequently than once every 5 years.
I would love to, Warren. We just need more money.
Because a lot of things happen.
I know.
And even the once a year visits.
I know. I know. We just need to have more donations pouring in to do that.
Yeah. Well, then, there's nothing wrong with paying for what you get.
There isn't. But you know as well as I do that the farmers are already carrying a huge burden. And we have 1,100 farms that have been certified now. And honestly, for all but a handful of them, there's been no economic reward. They simply believe in what we're doing. And if we succeed, there will be a financial reward. They will be able to get on a shelf because of their label, or people will pay a small premium because of their label, but it's not there yet. So all these farmers are doing this because they don't like what's happened to the National Organic Program. They do believe in organic.
How is this going to change the NOSB?
At the moment, the NOSB is unable to accomplish anything.
I mean, how is it going
The
to change?
recommendations haven't been acted on for 10 years.
So at some point, presumably,
Yeah.
it's going to get worse and worse. And so at some point, Real Organic's going to have to say, well, you know, we don't care about, you don't have to do the NOSB thing because there's no respect there. Which means that, I mean, if they start certifying these factory farms, they start certifying, you know, these farms in 6-story buildings in New York City and all around in Los Angeles and all around, and they have the hydroponics and they have I mean, everything, all the animal husbandry is just total terrible. You're going to have to say, well, what's the point of having any inspection from them? Which means you're going to have to inspect.
At that point, we'll have to charge for it unless
You're going to
unless
have to,
we can find a
you're gonna
large
have to
enough
charge for it,
funder to,
and you're going
to support that.
Right.
Look,
That'll be a good place.
yeah.
That'll be a very good place to be.
Yeah, we'll also need a large legal defense fund because we'll get sued by the USDA.
Yeah.
At the moment,
and of course, most of the produce in the stores, organic, will be these, you know, the USDA guys.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, but maybe that won't matter. I mean, maybe we'll just have, you know, one of the small sects, you know, in a bigger religion.
I think everything is we see that everything in the world is becoming, well, it's interesting. I was going to say more fragmented, and that less mass movement and more, much smaller
Yes.
chunks. But at the same time, there's a thing going on, and it's going on most particularly in the food movement, where we have fewer and fewer retailers. I sold to 3 companies in the Northeast that are all now owned by one Dutch multinational. Major chains.
Yeah.
Right? All owned, and there's a 4th one, I just never sold to them, all owned by one Dutch multinational.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so we see that there's this consolidation, and just like Grimway is now owned by Taylor, is now owned by, I don't even know which investment
Whole
firm.
Foods owned by Amazon.
Whole Foods owned by Amazon. So we see this happening, and every time that happens, I can tell you that when Ahold buys Stop and Shop choices start to look more like Walmart's.
Yeah.
That we lose diversity of choice.
Way back, farmers, you go to, they bring stuff into a store, they'd be at the farmer's market, and you'd ask them, well, are you organic? They say, oh yeah, I'm organic. I don't use pesticides. Or, yeah, I'm organic, trust me. That was the way it was in the beginning. And, people did. They did trust them. And because the consumers wanted more of it, they needed these standards. So then we get these standards. Now the consumers have a lot of it, and they have those standards which we don't like for much of it, but nevertheless they have a lot of it. So what's really happening on the tail end then, on the real organic end, these 1,000 farmers? What's happening, would seem to me, would be that we're kind of going back to, well, we're going to redefine what we mean by this, and if you don't really have it certified, and in a strict way, in a real conscionable way, with real oversight, then you're kind of everybody. Oh yeah, we're real organic. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm organic. I'm like real organic.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's
so maybe that, I don't know. Maybe that's okay.
There's no way that a real regenerative farmer can stop Bayer Monsanto from saying they're regenerative. And I'll tell you what, Bayer Monsanto's got a much bigger microphone than that livestock farmer.
What's it going to mean for anybody to say anything? What's it going to mean for a small farmer at the farmer's market to say, I'm regenerative? Yeah, I'm a member of Real Organic, but I'm also regenerative, or I'm sustainable, or I don't do this and I do this. But if you have an organization, you've got to make it a real organization. You've got to, I'm not saying Real Organic's not a real organization. I'm just saying you really have to have standards that are enforced in a real way and let the public know that in order for this Real Organic to have an impact on people's brains, and to say, yeah, this is really important. This really makes a difference.
So, of course, that's exactly, everything you say is exactly what we're trying to do in the Real Organic Project. There's a lot of noise out there. People say, why don't you just tell everyone? The Washington Post had a series of articles by a man named Peter Wiersky, a very fine journalist, exposing the fraud in the National Organic Program. And he did several on the egg CAFOs, several on the dairy CAFOs, and several on the grain fraud, and these follow-up things. And they hit the world hard, and Congress said, what the hell? And they put in some millions of dollars to try and end the grain fraud, the imported grain fraud.
Yeah.
And They haven't acted on it yet. It's been 4 years, but they're working on it, they say.
Right.
So we'll see. But my point is, even so, these were front page Washington Post, and if you ask almost anyone, they've never heard of them. Mm-hmm. Which shows you how very hard it is to penetrate. It's not like the old days where everybody watched the impeachment hearing of Richard Nixon. How many people watched the impeachment hearing of Donald Trump? I bet not that many. It's a complicated, noisy world in which the whole country doesn't watch 3 TV stations every night. It's different. You can't say it's better or worse. It's just different. So what I think that we need, we can't get seduced by big numbers or we'll just all go commit suicide. We'll go, oh my God, we'll never get there. We'll never take down Cargill or whatever. What we need to do is start having serious, sophisticated, complex conversations about our food system and our agricultural system. I was at one of the gatherings we had this week. Somebody said, well, yeah, but aren't you just preaching to the choir? And I said, well, I hope so, because the choir is millions of people. I should be so lucky as to be preaching to the choir. You know, it's like, I don't need to worry about the millions of people who disagree with me or never thought of it. There's millions of people who actually do agree and care about it, but they're not connected. They're not united in a movement. And as you know, I think Michael Pollan said, until we can light up the switchboards, we don't have a movement. So we can't light up the switch. We're not there yet.
Right. We've moved into a technological age since the 1970s. And I think that's confused people. And the organic movement was kind of seen as a Luddite movement. And I suppose that Real Organic needs to figure out, in order to light up the switchboard, is to figure out how you can emphasize basics in basic natural systems, and at the same time appeal to people who are just moving in a technological world that a lot of us older farmers never really, we participate in but don't really understand or really embrace.
And when you say you didn't embrace, what technology did you not embrace?
Oh, well, I'm still not on Facebook. I think social media is a disaster.
Well, we're all there.
No, we're not all there.
Well, the founders of Facebook mostly agree with you, so.
Yeah, well, they have their different reasons.
Yeah.
You know, because they can't, because it's getting out of control.
Yeah.
But I just don't think it's a good idea anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, no, I don't. But my younger, 6 years younger brother, 6 years younger than I am, brother, he knows more about my daughters than I do because he follows them.
Yeah.
So he'll tell me, "Oh, didn't you know Rachel's having a new show in a gallery?" And I said, "Oh, no, I didn't know that yet. She didn't told me. I'm waiting for her to tell me. He found it." So
yeah.
Yeah, I think I think we're in a world. I mean, you know, honestly, I'm, you know, what was that musical about the world spinning? Let me get off. What was that thing back in the 50s? I forget. Anyway.
Carousel.
The things are moving fast. I don't actually know what to think about. See, I've always thought that. I've never really thought that organic was going to feed the world, and that was its criticism by so many people. Oh, you can't feed the world. And okay, well, maybe that's true, but we're feeding more people. So why can't we just try to feed more people? And why isn't that good enough? So I don't know what the world should look like really in the overall food system. I don't know. But I know that the organic movement should be soil-based. At least for starters, it should be that.
Yeah.
We do have to be open to possibilities.
I agree, and I think that the conversations that happen around those possibilities where we go, well, are we going to call this organic? I think those are really valuable conversations. And I know, in the old days, the standards did not come down from on high, from bureaucrats in Washington. We met with a bunch of farmers every year, and we had arguments and discussions. Sometimes I heard CCOF in the early days, Bob Scowcroft said it was about to turn into a fist fight.
I don't know. I was president 85 to 88, and it was pretty peaceful. It wasn't too bad. And Bob and I both left shortly after that.
Yeah. But we had conversations that were animated, and people didn't agree. And that's okay. That was a creative process.
Yeah.
So let me ask you. You had an idea when you went in. We didn't know what we meant by organic, barely. We were just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
We had read books, and we had seen that there were living examples in the world of this kind of agriculture. And you said in the beginning it was almost defined by what it wasn't.
Yeah.
And it was a movement. The agriculture had existed all over the world for a long time,
right.
But it became a movement in response to the chemical ag revolution,
right.
where all of a sudden they were making all this fertilizer and getting miraculous yields for a little bit, and then looks like with those miraculous yields came miraculous problems, and so they were adding a lot of pesticides and herbicides, fungicides. So has your definition in your head, how you feel about organic, real organic, I'm not talking about whatever the USDA certifies, but what you think of as organic, has it changed in the last 40 years?
No.
So
it hasn't changed at all.
Could you tell me what that word real organic means to you?
Well, it means building your soil to the place that it will sustain good crops for you. And, that can mean things like companion planting, but it's building your soil in the most natural way you can, with cover crops and compost. You can't always do it. When I went down to the desert in '87 to get more year-round production, it's hot down there in Coachella Valley. And I always thought, well, you got to grow cover crops. You have to grow a cover crop. Absolutely have to grow a cover crop. So because it's winter production down there in the cash crop, in the summer, I started growing cover crops. And I was appalled by how much water it took. I was beside myself. I said, my God, I can't believe this. This is, I can't do this. I cannot keep pumping this amount of water. We were growing Sudan grass and stuff you grow down there. So I just said, well, I'm not going to do that. So what am I going to do? So, I talked with people, and I said, well, we plant down there in August, first week in August. And, right now it's 105, than 10 down there. The soil's hot. And so I thought, well, I guess we're just going to compost and see what happens. So we did that. It turned out fine. And it turns out that the microbes, when it gets hot, soil gets hot, they all work their way down, away from that. They go down, another few inches or whatever. And then you put your compost on, and then you start your planting and you're irrigating, and they come back up. The compost does this thing. And we had, and we did that every year for, I don't know how many, 30 years or something. And it was fine. Just depending on how much compost you needed and figure it out. But, so there was something that I thought was a thing you had to do, cover cropping. And then I turned out, well, people tell me, well, a lot of people don't cover crop. Even up here,
Yeah.
they don't cover crop. Although that was a standard thing in natural farming.
Yes.
A standard, and it's a good thing.
I also know farmers who don't use compost at all. It's all cover cropping.
It's all covered, yeah, of course.
So
Yeah, right. Given the sequence, given your seasons, yeah, you could do that. Yeah,
they live in a great climate for growing cover
you
crop.
could do a fast cover crop of barley or something, and
Yeah, they'll put it in for a year.
yeah,
Yeah. They'll be incorporating a jungle,
right,
and that's their fertility program.
right.
And actually, one farmer I'm thinking of is a vegan, and they don't want to use animal products,
Yeah,
but they're obviously real organic.
Yeah.
They're doing it all with cover crop.
Yeah.
So I think either one is acceptable as long as you're feeding the soil.
The cover crop. When I started with horses. I mean, I was really trying to be as natural as I could.
I started with oxen.
You did? I started with one horse, then I got a team of Percherons, and then, but what I found out was, I couldn't put under the cover crop with the horses.
Yeah.
Got too tall. I couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
I couldn't get the disc, get big enough disc. So, and then I learned, little I know, that, well, the way they used to do it, they grow a cover crop and then they put the animals out and eat it down. Then they go in and disc and plow their field and put in their beans or whatever they're going to do.
Yeah.
But
No, that's
and that's another question about organic farming. Is it? It's this kind of it's in a way a sort of a monoculture. I mean, it's not. We have different definitions for that, but people used to say to me, "Well, why don't you? How come you don't have any animals?" And then I did some little back of the napkin computing and realized, well, I need like a dairy of 400 cows in order to have enough manure to put out here. Because you put your manure and then you grow your cover crop. Then this is before composting, and then you put that under. Put the manure on in the fall with your cover crop, and then in the spring plow it under. And I realized, well, I don't want to run a dairy.
Yeah.
So what was the real balance? So what is what is regenerative farming? What is sustainable farming? What is what is natural farming? What the hell is farming? Some people raise earthworms. It's a farm.
That's right, livestock.
Earthworm farm.
That's right.
I mean, it's a lot of different things. Well, we're a little bit back to that, the motivation of organics in the first place, which really was around the consumer. It was our consumers who created the industry more than the farmers did. We were responding to what they wanted. We think of a lot of the history is about all these organic farmers are so smart and they came together and they did this thing. But it was always, at least here, it was always about our consumers. I mean, when I started out, we had all these little natural food stores around here. Our store and course, earth. And we had Living Foods, and we had a lot of smaller stores here. And we were just supplying them, and we were trying to do what they wanted us to do. And we ended up getting the laws because people wanted those laws. We didn't feel we needed them so much as they feel we needed them. And that's kind of why we did it. So maybe that's what's going to happen in the future. Maybe this this amalgamation we've had in almost everything is going to deconstruct, and maybe real organic is going to be part of that deconstruction. But the consumers are going to have to be there for it.
Absolutely.
They're going to have to be there.
All right, let me ask you a final question, maybe a final question here. I think, have given a complicated answer to the question, is organic regenerative? What I heard, though, is your answer is yes, real organic. I don't necessarily mean with a capital R and a capital O, but real organic. What you meant by organic is regenerative, what you mean by regenerative. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, I'm not sure because I don't really know what people mean by that.
Yeah, I know.
You know, at first it was when they didn't like organic in academia, they came up with sustainable. So I don't know what the definition of regenerative is. I need to know that. Just as I didn't really know what they meant by sustainable, and they weren't too sure either. There was no clear. See, we had a definition of organics. Once we had the law, once we created, we had an actual definition. Here's what it means. Here are the practices. This is okay. This isn't. This is okay. And we kept arguing about that stuff. But it was overall, it was not using chemical fertilizers, and it was building soils. That's the kind of bottom starting point. But beyond that, you know, it was these practices. Honestly, I don't think we know where we're going exactly, and I think that's good. But I think as long as we're open to being challenged by the things we see that make us uncomfortable and abhorrent things we see, and we want to fight against that, injustice, war, chemical fertilizers, plastics in the ocean, social injustice, whatever it is, then I think we're probably regenerating in a good way.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
That answered that question. So, Warren, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, a long conversation. I really appreciate it.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Fun being with you.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. Our movement is growing because you're subscribing and sharing these podcasts with your friends. So keep it up and leave us a rating and a review as well so that others can find us. You can find a video version of this interview on our newly designed website, realorganicproject.org, or on our YouTube channel. And you can join us every Thursday for a new episode featuring voices from the organic movement. See you next time.